Okay, video 2. So now we've got this animation sort of worked out. And I'm alright with this timing to begin with. Let's see. It's not very long, really. So it looks like almost 3 seconds or something like that. I'll go ahead and stretch it out to, say, frame 60. Um, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go in here and we're going to start looking at the curves on our ball. Okay, so if I grab my main control here, this is the part that people sometimes neglect. I know the graph editor is a pain in the butt. I understand that, but you can't really ignore it. So there's a couple little things we're going to have to add in here to sort of make it work. Like there's a couple of keyframes here. This is a really slow anticipation down. So probably what I'll do is I'll kind of borrow from frame 3, move that out here to like 12 or something like that. And so now we kind of get a little bit of a quicker one. Maybe I want to hit that and hold it, so maybe I'll borrow from frame 16, pull back a little bit, maybe pull some of that. So what we get now is this wait, then you anticipate, kind of hold it, and then jump. Okay, so we get those going on, and maybe like right here at the end, we want to kind of spend some time just letting the character sort of resettle. And just do a little bit more. Maybe something like this. And then we hit S, and so I want that to kind of ease in kind of quickly, so I'll borrow from there, maybe something like that. Okay, so we got those last few little keyframes that just kind of settle in some of those final questions. And now we're going to spend some time in the graph editor figuring out how to make this stuff move more clearly. Okay, so now when we're talking about spacing and timing, this is what we were talking about. We're going to talk about what we're going to do in here. And the part that most people will hear and still just refuse to believe that what you have to do in animation is literally go through the graph editor and edit every one of these channels. Okay? You have to look at every one of them and see if it's doing what you want it to do. Now, for those of you who are maybe still a little weak on the graph editor and what exactly it does, basically right now let's take translate Y, for example. So if I choose translate Y, mainly because translate X is the side-to-side movement, we didn't really move them side-to-side very much. So if we grab this, we can see that translate Y has a value. So in the graph editor, our values go up and down, time and numbers of frames go side to side, right? So as we drag forward in time through these frames, these little markers are just telling us what our value is on translate Y at that frame, right? And so as we get here, we'll start to see that translate Y's value, shoots up. It goes up to 21 from, 0.5. So that's why this curve is drawn this way. So it's just like graphing anything. We're going to get these sort of these curves that do different things, and we'll explore the curve editor a little bit more later. But right now, the thing we need to remember is that our job is to kind of control the way these transition. So I'm sure you've seen this already, but this kind of eases out, and so since this eases out, if we look at how our character leaves the ground, he kind of leaves a little slow, doesn't he? And we really want him to pop out of there, like that energy is pushing against the floor is really a lot of force. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this and we're going to break these tangents. And so I can get something maybe a little bit like that if I wanted to. Break that tangent. Now there's another option, and sometimes I do this with all of it, is instead of just working with it like it is, I will grab every control on this character, right? And I'll go to curves, weighted tangents, and now you'll see those tangents have like one side shorter, one side longer. And then we can do one more thing, is if we select the entire curves, we click this button here, this is going to free the tangent weights. Okay, so what that's going to allow us to do is now if I go back in here and look at this and how this is controlled, I can grab this tangent and I can move it around, but I can also pull it in and out. And so that's a nice little mechanism. Another thing for navigating in here is if you hold Shift Alt and right click, you can zoom in and out in a specific angle. Okay, so what I'm still going to go ahead and break this tangent. And I'm going to do that by grabbing this. I'll click this little button there. So that will allow me to kind of do this and just sort of reposition how this curve looks. Another thing some people do is this, kind of widen that a little bit. So what we get now, we'll see in that jump, is that it really has a lot more force to it, right? And so we can go ahead and add that into the second one as well, break those tangents. Really kind of get this feeling a little bit more forceful when the character jumps. But this is a very important step because we really need to be able to feel that energy. Okay. So now we have to go through there and do this with the rest of these curves as well. So you'll see stuff like this. I'm not so sure where that's supposed to be balanced. Also something to consider is if we look at this animation from the side, and sort of pay attention to our translate Z, this is the forward motion. The character seems to sort of, so it kind of stays in the same position there. It doesn't really seem to go forward, and that's because we're easing out of these keys as well. So we can actually grab those two and change those to linear. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Linear. And now we're going to get a little bit more of that like forward progression. Now, this is a nice tool that will actually come in handy when doing this type of work. Is I can, under the animation menu, I can go to animate, create editable motion trail. I have to go make sure that motion trails are turned on. And now we'll actually be able to see the arcs of our character in the viewport. Okay? So we can actually see the way this character jumps now and the arcs that it takes. And you'll see that maybe that's a little sharper than I even wanted it to be. But part of that may actually be because of how this is still easing in and out. So if I switch that to linear, yeah, that's feeling a little bit more like the arc I would want. We can actually still grab these and move these. These are actual movable points, and it will change our tangents inside of the graph editor too. So, but this curve, once you're done sort of seeing it for your arcs, you can just grab the curve and delete it. And so that's actually helping quite a bit. We can add some little secondary action now if we wanted to, which I think I do. I'm going to add some blinks in here. So maybe the character during this jump here blinks. So yeah, this blink. And then maybe we put another little blink here. So I'll right click on these, key selected, move it forward to blinks all the way, hold that for another frame. So usually what I do is I have it sort of ease into that blink, so I will maybe grab the first frame and pull it back just by a touch, like -9 or something like that. And then I may overshoot the open just a little bit. Okay, and then we could also have another one right here as he jumps if we wanted to, or just maybe like a partial blink. Like that. And so now what we get with those blinks is a little bit more liveliness in the character. So that's working a little better. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the tail back in and the antenna back in. And I'll go ahead and do these one at a time. So I want to do the tail or the antennas first because they're not going to be that challenging. I'm just going to kind of have them do a little bit of reacting to the jump itself. And so there's no keys on it yet, so I'm just going to hit S. And so all I'm doing is sort of posing in these antennae. So at first I want it to be kind of loose, not really anything too crazy. I don't want it to be symmetrical completely, so I want to do a little bit of twisting and turning on them here just to get them a little bit more, just non-symmetrical. And hit S. And so I'm just going to animate these kind of reacting now. So let's say the character is going to bend down. So what I want this to do is I want it to kind of maybe scrunch up with the character a little bit as he anticipates down. And that way when he jumps here, I want them to totally drag like this. Okay, so I guess I can go ahead and add that keyframe in if I want to. Okay, because I know that I want that there. And I can hit S again to hammer that down. Now what we're going to get out of that is this. And although that's not bad, maybe that's not exactly what I want. Maybe I want it to feel like it kind of flips. So maybe for this pose I'll do a little bit of something like this. So let's see what that does. Yeah, so that's not bad. This jump. So now as the character is coming back down, I want it to feel like it's kind of dragging just a little bit. Maybe not terribly, just a little bit of drag, something like this. And so I'm going to go through here and just kind of make that happen. Now, when we get this hitting on the ground, we're obviously going to do some sort of recoil for that. So, that's going to start maybe here. So I'll anticipate back one last little bit and set a keyframe there. And let me actually clean this up just a little. Okay. And then, as a sort of a recoil from this impact, I'll flip these on forward really far. Make sure they don't blow through the eyes too much. Okay. So something like that. Okay, so now when we watch this first jump, that's not bad. And then we can do another little jump on there if we want to for that second jump. I'm going to let that sort of settle in. Maybe these kind of come back up and get back into their neutral pose. Not neutral, but like a little bit more of a neutral pose. And that, just kind of give them some settle time. All right. And then we're going to kind of hold that for a little bit. And we're going to do one more small jump. So we'll anticipate down just a little bit. Excuse me. Anticipate down just a bit. And then on the jump, we'll drag a little down. And then as it's coming in for a landing, drag a little back. Then we hit a little bit more of this overshoot again. And then we're going to just kind of settle back up into where we want it to be. So maybe something like that. I'll make sure I'm setting keyframes on all these. And then find our our final pose, right? So when we watch this now, the only thing I'm not liking is it does sort of a little pop-up right here, right there. So it hits the ground and then does this little pop-up here, and I'm not crazy about that. So I'll probably just go ahead and take that out. Whatever that pose is right about there. And so I'll grab those. It's that one. And so maybe I can actually just sort of borrow that one back there a little bit more. Let's see. So not bad. I think some of the timing is slightly off because I think this one kind of flips forward a little too early or something. We're going to do one more thing to the timing that just kind of helps it a little bit. Now this isn't always going to work, but this is sort of a little trick on something that's sort of flopping and being dragged around. And that's how we can kind of make some changes to this whip action that's happening here. So in almost all these cases, the base of the head is what is leading this, and it's dragging behind each segment below it, right? So if the head moves, the head has to move for this part to even feel it and react, right? This part has to move before this can even feel it and react. And then this has to move before this can even feel it and react. So that causes this chain reaction, and that means that this moves first, and then this moves a little bit later, and then this moves a little bit later. So we can kind of go in here and do that manually just by grabbing these and just kind of shifting these keys a little bit. And I'm just going to shift them forward one frame later. Okay, so if I go look at my section there, basically what I did is I said the second two segments on each of the antenna are going to move one frame later. And so I can do that with the end here as well, and kind of move those even one frame later. So basically if you look at the controls now, you can kind of see that they're happening one after the other in these frames. And so when we play this, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, I get a little bit more of a drag feel to it. Now they're still kind of, and this is what we were talking about when we say overlapping action. The action doesn't happen all at once and all at the same time. So I'm shifting keyframes around for that. But it can still be even better because both antennae are kind of moving at the same time. So what I can do is I can grab an entire antenna and grab all of their keyframes, and we can actually move them in here as well. So I'm actually going to have this second one happen, this one here happen just a little bit later. So I dragged it 2 frames later on the timeline. So let's see how that looks. So it's not bad. Okay, so we got a little bit of a, a little bit of that going on. Now there's something else we could kind of add in here if you wanted to play around with that lead and follow. Is right now we have these forward and backward bends. We can also sort of play with when they happen. So front and back bends and this left and right bends. And I'm actually going to try this just to see what happens. Is if I have those happen one frame later, does that make this animation a little looser? I actually think it does. Because what's actually happening is when the character comes in and hits the ground, okay, it's going to rotate forward, but it's not going to start rotating until after it's already hit the ground and started to squash. So you kind of see how it does that? Like it hits, squashes, then rotates. And so that's overlapping action at its heart there. And this overlapping action and this lead and follow through stuff going on we have in the antenna is helping a lot too. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this because this video is getting a little long, and I'll come back and do one more video for the tail. Hopefully it'll be a little shorter, and that should wrap up the entire animation.